I'm Vicki Hogarth and welcome to Southwest Magazine. My guest today is seeking leadership of the New Brunswick Liberal Party, Susan Holt. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So for people who might not be as familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what your background is?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Fredericton. That's where I call home. I went to Connaught Street School. That's where I learned French. I was lucky enough to take the early French immersion program from grade 1 all the way up to grade 9. Alors, je suis bilingue, je peux parler français. Et je pense que c'est important pour un premier ministre. I think it's important for a premier to be able to speak both languages. As a kid, I was an outdoor kid. I loved being a camp counselor and going in the woods and camping and that kind of thing. And I was a rugby player. So I got to play rugby for New Brunswick for a couple of years. It was nice to wear the New Brunswick flag on my jersey and do that. I went away to school in Ontario. I did, I'm a bit of a nerd, I guess I would say. I did a degree in chemistry and a degree in economics at Queen's. And then most of my career was built in the private sector. So I moved to Toronto, Australia, India, Ottawa, all working for tech companies, doing sales, doing marketing, doing HR work. I moved back to New Brunswick in 2007 because my high school sweetheart was ready to settle down. So moved home, we got married. We have 3 daughters, a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 4-year-old, all little girls. And it was when I moved back home in 2007 that I started getting more engaged in the community work that I think has brought me into politics. So I was lucky enough to be chosen to be the CEO of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce back in 2010. And that role really introduced me to advocacy for the small business community, working with municipal politicians, provincial politicians, federal politicians in some cases, working to advance the issues that were important to the small business community in Fredericton. And in Fredericton, we had a lot of not-for-profit members, actually. There's probably 30% of the chamber membership were charitable organizations and not-for-profits. So we actually had to do a lot of consensus building around the policy table to figure out what we were putting forward to government, make sure it represented the interests of all of our members. I really loved that work. It was because you're really engaged. It also gave me the chance to interact with media. Spent a lot of time doing TV and radio and that kind of thing on behalf of the chamber. And it gave us the chance to host the State of the Province. Mm-hmm. So I learned when I joined the chamber was in a bit of a challenging situation. They'd been losing money, they'd been losing members. And so with my leadership and the team there and our board of directors, we were able to turn it around within 18 months, grow the membership, and put on the most interactive State of the Province event that I think the province has ever seen, where we polled our members for questions, we let people vote on those questions, and Premier Allward graciously took unexpected questions from us based on what the people of New Brunswick said they wanted to hear. I went on from the Chamber to the New Brunswick Business Council, so similarly, still working with the provincial government, working with the business community. And at the Business Council, I really tried to open up the work. We invited people into our meetings, junior achievers, startup entrepreneurs. We started live streaming some of our presentations and debates. And then the government at the time created something called the Jobs Board, and that was a new organization in government meant to create an economic growth plan. And so I applied for a position to be a part of the Jobs Board, and in 2015 I became a civil servant. So I got to spend 3 years understanding how the bureaucracy worked, working with departments, working with the Executive Council, working with the Premier's office and Cabinet. I had the chance to be on the floor of the legislature, passing red tape reduction legislation and learning that process. And so I think it's been really helpful for me to see all these different parts of the system. And to that point in 2018, I decided to become a candidate. I ran as a candidate for the Liberal Party in that election and loved it. Loved door knocking, loved talking to people about our province and the things that they cared about. The Liberals didn't win that election, so I returned to the private sector. For the last 3 years, I've been working for a social enterprise called Play-Doh Testing and its sister company, PQA. That's a company that recruits, trains, and hires Indigenous people in software testing careers. And we do that out of Fredericton and out of the Miramichi, as well as across Canada. I've been responsible for the growth of the company, the sales and marketing arm, and more recently, the people arm. So I think, maybe to summarize that whole little blurb about me, I'm someone that loves to come in and make change. That's what I've done at the Chamber, at the Business Council, and government, and with Plato. And I think that I've had the chance now to see community work, government work, private sector work, political work, and I think I have a perspective on how these systems come together that I'd like to offer New Brunswickers and Liberals to suggest that there's a more collaborative, there's a more open and transparent way that we could do government.
I read in an interview that you said you'd like to shake things up. So what exactly did you mean by that, and what do you think specifically needs shaking up? Obviously more transparency, but in what ways would you do that?
Yeah, I think we're watching a real loss of trust in government and loss of trust in politicians. I think we've seen over time and time again that people really don't feel represented and don't feel like they can access the people that are supposed to be representing them. And so I think we really do need to change both how parties work and how government works to rebuild that trust. And so being more open and transparent is a big part of that. And so specifically to me, transparency means open data. There's a whole movement around digital government and open data to make available the information that supports policymaking, but also could support the participation of citizens, everyday folks, researchers into that policy making. I think it means that as politicians, we really have to behave differently. We have to have public meetings. We have to be accessible to people. People have to understand where and how you're spending your time. They have to know that they can reach you and that you're prepared to talk with anyone. Because to rebuild that trust, I think it's going to require vulnerability. I think as parties, we have to move away from this world of talking points, right? I'm sure you've probably interviewed a ton of politicians, and sometimes you can tell when you get there and they're just delivering a talking point and they're not getting at the question, and that's what erodes trust. So I think we need to be brave and recognize that local representatives can and should voice the needs of their community. Right? There is maybe some guidance or a script that comes from the party, but the local representative should be able to say, this is what my neighbors want and need, and should be even allowed to vote that way. And so I think the shakeup is a bit of that. It's really putting more faith and trust in local representatives, ceasing the strong sort of partisanship or whippedness of the system, and then you add in that transparency, and I think that'll help us rebuild trust with the people of New Brunswick, and I think that'll help us earn the opportunity to govern. And so I think that transparency and authenticity will help people participate, right? If you can make visible the work, then that'll lend itself, I think, to greater input, greater interaction.
And obviously, your background in technology would show you a path to make things more transparent, put them online, and find ways of connecting that you could more so than maybe is doing now. Though I think the pandemic has played a role in opening up doors that we didn't think possible with government. Would you agree?
Definitely. I actually think it's an opportunity that we should be seizing, right? And New Brunswick at one point was a real leader in technology, right? We, back in NBTEL days, were advancing some firsts out there globally, and that's how some of our service models came about. But since those days, I think that we've stalled in our digital leadership, so I think now is the perfect time to really advance on e-health initiatives, look at what does digital health look like, how could we better serve people all over the place with telehealth models, how do we get our health data on the same platform, right? We have hospitals that are using different systems, and so if you're a nurse here at the local hospital and then you move to work at a different hospital, you're going to run into a different data system, and that means patient information isn't consistent. And so patients don't get well served, and there's a lot of extra administration in that system. So I think we should be embracing some of the shifts that people started to make during the pandemic and really moving forward with those, because it's more efficient. You get better service to citizens and people. It should be less costly. And so I think there's some innovative things we could do there. And that's on the health side. That actually applies across the spectrum, right? If we really accelerated digital government and got into a space where we could deliver services to most New Brunswickers through online mechanisms, it does require good high-speed internet access everywhere, right? I think there's an infrastructure piece that we need to address. There's lots of people who want to come move to New Brunswick. They want to do so if they can have access to high-speed internet. They want to be in our beautiful province, right? They want to be in the woods, or they want to be on the ocean or the bay. but they want access to healthcare, they want access to housing, and they need that internet to do the work they do today. So we should be accelerating our infrastructure and the services we deliver on it so that the people of New Brunswick get better service from government.
Now, some of your critics might say, oh, you haven't had a long enough political career to be running for leader, but your business career seems to inform a lot of what you would bring politically to the table. Can you talk a little bit about why you feel prepared for this role right now?
Yeah, well, I think politics as usual isn't working for us. I think that, if we want what we have today, we can keep doing things the way we've done them. But I think people don't want the status quo from our government. And so I think my perspective from working in the business community, from working at the community level, from working in government, gives me a broader perspective on issues and solutions, and maybe less habit or status quo of this is how we've always done things. I'm going to come at things a different way. But I actually think my perspective is maybe more comprehensive, because I have had a chance to both write policy, present it on the floor of the ledge, lobby for it outside of the system, and having an understanding of how all those pieces work, I think means that I can lead that system differently. Mm-hmm. But I also think we need to shake things up, right? I think we've been doing politics the same way for a lot of years, centuries, you might say.
And from the many lenses that you have, what would you say are some of New Brunswick's strengths right now that we should be looking into as a province that maybe we are undervaluing at this time?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think New Brunswick has a lot of strengths that we could be better leveraging. I think one of them is in the tourism side. I think, our tourism efforts are very efficient. The team in tourism has really learned, and you've probably seen that down here in Charlotte County, right? They can stretch a dollar. But we have some phenomenal assets, right? We are a gorgeous province. Obviously, we have the Bay of Fundy. We have historical beauty. We have cultural diversity. We have an artistic community that is unrivaled. Our music, there's a lot there that I think we could get more bang for our buck if we invested a little bit more. I think on the agricultural side, we are a province that produces primary resources, whether it's wood or farming or fishing or others, and there is opportunity to develop more creative products. There's people that are working to figure out how do you turn a fish into something even more valuable, the same way that we turned a potato into a French fry, into a hash brown, to get more value out of it. So those are a few. I think on the technology side, the world is our oyster, and specifically on the green tech side. Mm-hmm. We're doing some interesting things in biomass and green energy development, in a whole bunch of different technology that supports both renewable energy as well as green infrastructure. So I think those are some areas that we could really see New Brunswick develop its economy in those areas.
I'm going to pivot for a second and just ask, and I've asked the other candidates I've had the chance to sit down with so far, what do you think, where do you think the Liberal Party is right now in New Brunswick? Why do you think maybe the last election the Liberal Party didn't finish as strongly as maybe they had hoped to?
I think the last election was a curious one because it was mid-pandemic, right? I think the government chose to go into an election for that very reason, right? They were in a pandemic. They were looking for stability, wanting to get a majority status. It was a bit of a surprise. So unfortunately, I don't think the Liberal Party was ready. We were recruiting candidates desperately, sort of throwing together a campaign in short order. So I think that hurt. And at the time, we had a new leader who had very little time to introduce themselves to the public and gain experience in that public forum. And so I think that those were things that worked against us. I think actually this is a great opportunity for the Liberal Party now. We have a little bit of time, and we have a big shift in society that's happening, right? The pandemic contributed to it, certainly, but we're seeing it with the war in the Ukraine, with things like the Freedom Convoy that are questioning our discourse as neighbors and as citizens. And I think it's the time for a new politics, right? It's the time for something different. The Liberal Party could write that chapter for New Brunswickers and say, okay, we're going to offer you something fresh, that's more transparent, that's more authentic. And that, I think, will earn the trust and interest of New Brunswickers.
And where is the campaign trail taking you at the moment? And what are you learning from speaking to New Brunswickers? And finally face-to-face a lot of the time now.
Yeah, you know what? It's been amazing getting to spend these last few months traveling all over the province, talking to New Brunswickers in every corner, because I mean, it feels like a real gift to be, we have a beautiful province, right? Whether I was in Petit Rocher a couple weeks ago, in Hillsborough a few days ago, you know, and everywhere I go, I hear pretty similar things, actually. People are frustrated. They don't feel heard or represented. They don't feel like anyone cares about them. And so I think that's why we need, you know, to do what the Liberal Party does best, right? The Liberal Party is a big heart party that really cares about helping people. I think we need to care for our caregivers. Everywhere I go, I hear about healthcare. Right? Most people are very, very concerned about the precarious nature of our healthcare system right now, about the nurses that are holding it up, about the people working in long-term care homes. I think there's a lot of anxiety around people's ability to find a family doctor, people's faith in the emergency system. So everywhere I go, I hear we need to fix our healthcare system and care for the people that are caring for us. That has to be a priority for the Liberal Party going forward. I hear about housing, I hear about environmental issues, I hear about economic issues, the need for labor, the need for education strengthening and immigration. There's lots of issues that people are interested in and want to see a more caring and a more connected and collaborative approach to addressing some of those big policy issues and big crises of our times. So I think the good news is it's really consistent. There's a lot of consensus around those priorities, and there's a really big consensus that we need to do something different. We can't approach these crises with the same politics that we've been using for the last century.
If you are elected leader, how will you bring the party together and really strengthen the party?
That's a good question, because people have sensed that there's fractions in the party. I've fortunately observed a lot of consistency among Liberals. Like I said, when I talk to folks, most Liberals say they want something fresh. It's time for some new ideas. It's time for new people. We want to unify people under this idea of New Brunswick that is transparent and open, where we have authentic politicians, a really collaborative approach. But my plan would be to go out and be in every riding and meet with Liberals and volunteers and riding associations and connect with people at a personal level. And not just do that on the ground, where it's really important to be there in person, but also do that technologically. So we could be doing virtual meetings. I'm hosting a Facebook Live on Monday night, right? Because you want to make yourself accessible in public forums to answer questions and to build relationships and get to know people. So I think once the Liberal Party chooses a new leader, there's a great opportunity to go out and connect digitally and in person and really figure out, where do we want to go collectively? What do we want to offer to New Brunswickers for the next election? And how can we energize the possibility of that and show that you could do politics differently, that the Liberal Party can do politics differently going forward.
So, and what's your summer going to be like? Is it?
Yeah, so from here, we're in a big push to the cutoff. There's a cutoff to register for to vote in the race on Wednesday, June 15th at 4:30 is the last point when you can get registered to get a ballot. After that, we have some forums. The association has organized some all-candidate forums, 7 of them in different parts of the province. We're going to go back out to all 49 ridings to engage with both our supporters and people who are undecided. We're going to hold more online events and give people access. I'm going to make a lot of phone calls. The team's going to make a lot of phone calls between June 15th and July 30th. And then the ballots will be mailed out and folks will start voting online by over the phone in person on August 6th. But it'll be a lot more travel, a lot of phone calls, a lot of online meetings, and a lot of both listening and sharing ideas with people.
It's worth noting, and I was actually shocked that you're the first female candidate for Liberal leadership ever.
Yeah.
What took so long to get to this point in our New Brunswick history?
That's a great question. It's hard to say what took so long. We've certainly seen examples of women running and leading other parties. And so why so long for the Liberals? It's hard to say, other than I will say politics is not super accessible, right? It's not something just anybody can walk in off the street and and raise the fee and get the signatures and take the time off, right? Like, I'm taking leave from work to do this. That's not possible for everyone, right? I'm really lucky to have support from my partner and from our family to make this possible, but not everybody has that option. And so, and I think particularly women don't always have that option because of the tradition, I guess, or the historical responsibilities that we've carried for work and childcare and other things. So I think, I think these are institutions that are sometimes slow to change. And I certainly feel a responsibility that I desperately wanted to see diversity. I want to see diversity in the legislature. I want to see people of different backgrounds with different lived experience in the legislature helping to make policy. And as I was watching this race evolve and I was looking for that diversity of candidate and experience, and felt that, well, if I can work out my life such that this might be possible, then maybe I have a responsibility to, because not every woman can, and not every person can. And so that was a piece of it for me, is that it should be visible. It should be visible to my 3 little girls. It should be visible to people who want to see themselves represented in the legislature, that there are options, that there are people going for that kind of leadership and offering, maybe a different background, a different perspective.
Mm-hmm. Can we talk a little bit about your platform as we get closer and closer to the end of the interview? Just for takeaway, what are the key platform points that you want people to remember when? Let's talk first about when they're registering to vote.
Yeah. When people are registering to vote, I hope they'll be looking at who is going to lead a real renewal for the party, who's going to help our party connect with New Brunswickers, attract new people, and bring about the kind of government that really offers opportunity to advance for the province. For me, from a platform perspective, we've done a few different things as a team. We've been listening to Liberals and to future Liberals for the last, I don't know how many months, since December. And so we've chosen the priorities that they've articulated to us: healthcare, housing, the environment, the economy, right? Those are things that we've been exploring. I've been putting out blog posts about those topics, right, to put some ideas out there on how we could do things differently. And then it's what I've talked about a little bit already. I think what we really need is a change in political behavior. So I think it is that radical transparency. It's an authenticity and an empathy that we need to show as a political party and as politicians. I think it's that care, right? It's that heart on your sleeve care for New Brunswickers that, maybe we've in the past been very statesmanlike. I think people want to know that we're real and that we care about them. I think that's really what New Brunswickers are saying. And they want to see collaboration and connectedness. So that's my platform. It's a new politics that is open and transparent, authentic and empathetic, caring and collaborative. And I believe that change in how we do politics then gets applied to the what policy issue. Mm-hmm. And with that, I add this layer of digital transformation that leans on my tech background, but also a notion that we need to consciously strengthen our democracy, right? As we see this polarization happening, as we notice that we're arguing with our family members or with our neighbors about who's pro or who's anti, and as the conflict is starting to feel really, really close, I think we need to be intentionally making sure that our democratic institutions are strong and that people believe that their vote matters and that we're actively doing things to make sure that that vote does matter, right? That we're looking at electoral reform. We're looking at strengthening people's votes and strengthening our respect for New Brunswickers, whether that's Francophone New Brunswicker, Anglophone, First Nations, union members, women, children, you name it. We have to show that respect for New Brunswickers that leads by example in how we can come together and have conversations and bridge that polarization that it feels like society is moving toward. So I want to see attention to a stronger democracy, a digital transformation, and then this new type of politics that is transparent and authentic.
Beyond just being leader of the Liberal Party, what is it when you look at the current government that you think needs changing, that you'd be able to bring if you are the leader, beyond just being a new leader for the Liberals?
Yeah, I think it stems from what I was just talking about. I think there's a respect that I want to see shown to New Brunswickers. And I think some of that's missing when we see full-page ads being taken out against unions, or when we see maps of the province held up with half of them in red and being told that somebody might be taking our land, I think that's very divisive. I think it's very dangerous. I think that behavior needs to change, and it needs to come from a place of respect and love, because leadership shouldn't be setting an example of divisiveness and pitting us against each other. And that's one of the reasons why I chose to run. I was so frustrated by that example that was being set and by the nature of the communications to everyday New Brunswickers that treated them as less important than a different New Brunswicker. That's not the way forward. You know, we need respect for all New Brunswickers. We need a really caring government that can be vulnerable and be open, share data. I mean, during the pandemic, we have been desperate for data, and what used to be a daily press conference is now silence, which breeds mistrust, right? People are scared and anxious. They need leaders to be communicating and sharing information and doing that with care and respect. And so that's what I think that a refreshed Liberal Party could offer New Brunswickers.
And final thoughts for today's interview, not just why should people vote for you, but why should people bother to get out there, register, and vote at all?
Thank you for the question. I mean, it's true that these party-based leadership contests don't attract as much participation as a general election, even though this is really where the change starts. Who is going to be on the ballot in 2024 will be determined by the people who participate in these kinds of contests. So I would say to folks, if they care about who might lead our province, then it would be great to get engaged now and consider the four of us, consider who maybe represents the kind of New Brunswick or the kind of politics they want to see going forward, and get engaged now, because then that will affect the direction that the Liberal Party goes in, and thus the direction that the political discourse in New Brunswick will go in. And you could say the same for there's leadership contests happening all over the place in other provinces at the federal level. I think the decisions are made by the people who show up. So I fully support getting engaged, participating, because that act of voting is what decides.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and come back whenever you are in St. Andrews.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me, Vicki.
My guest today has been Susan Holt, who is seeking leadership of the New Brunswick Liberal Party. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Southwest Magazine.
Southwest Magazine is a news and public affairs production of CHCO Television.